You know, an ugly 3 points is still 3 points. We're going to criticize them. We're going to talk about the things they did wrong. We're going to talk about how poor this game was. But at the end of the day, you cannot deny that Pirates needed these 3 points. This is a Pirates team that lost its first 2 games. It needed this 3 points. This is a Pirates team that is trying to chase Mamelodi Sundowns. They needed this 3 points. This is an Abdeslam Wadu who is being questioned left, right, and center. He needed this 3 points. The biggest credit I can give to Pirates from this game is the same that I used to give to Jose's team last season. Some games are not going to be pretty. Some games you're going to need to suffer. And Pirates suffered very well this game. The same credit I gave to Usbisi last season for the way he marshaled the defense under pressure, you have to give to Mbogazi. What a player. What a leader. We're going to get to why, because that defense was not covered, but what a leader, what a calm head. And sometimes you need a hero to pop up and win you a game, which is exactly what Siema did. You need an unlikely win that's given to you by a Hoto free kick and a Makaula header. A random shot by Mbata. You need sometimes those things to get you over, because again, a Tuesday game after the high of playing Mamelodi Sundowns, a Tuesday game versus an Orbit that doesn't have 3 of its most dangerous players that happen to be Pirates players and can't play because of the loan arrangement. A game where, you can tell that things are not coming together and heads are down. These are the games they usually lose, but they won it. But if we're going to get into the game, I think there are some issues that Pirates needs to work on. So we'll work through it. I think the defense, I don't know if it's because they're overconfident. I don't know if there's a huge trust. But that defense is left bare a lot of the time, and they have to deal with a lot of pressure on their own. To give credit to Orbit College, it's a team that came out and decided today that, you know what, we're going to push forward, we're going to be positive, we're going to send players up. Their press wasn't as impressive, their press wasn't as coordinated as maybe it should be, but they were able to put Pirates under a little bit of pressure. You know, there were moments where you look up and you say, if they had played a certain pass, there was a run being made. There was a particular moment where, a few times in that first half, where Mbogazi and Siema, they sort of chased the ball. So the ball was coming up the wing, Siema gets pulled in, Mbogazi gets pulled in, and because he's so focused, I don't know if it's because he wants to cover Siema, but he's so focused, there's plenty of times where there's runs that are happening right behind him, that if a team can pick it up, similar to maybe what Kukune was trying to do, if a team can pick up those runs, that can be a problem, because Uhoto is a little bit too far having to play all the way up. I think Pirates doesn't have defensive cover, where again, Unduli is an incredible player. You would say that he's more complete than a Makaula, you'd say. But he doesn't have the defensive defensive focus that a Makaula has, to cover that defense a little bit more, to make sure that he's killing the balls right before they get through or get to that defense. I think Umariko in this game was unsure of his role. Literally in the first few minutes, you could see Umabasa shouting at him, telling him, hey, this is where you're supposed to be watching, this is where you're supposed to be. And what that did was that it didn't allow Pirates to play through. It didn't allow Pirates to play the ball up the middle. It didn't allow Pirates to have control through the midfield. And I'll speak about why just now. Up top, I think there's going to be games like this where teams are going to double Sibelebele as the dangerous player. They're going to double him, or he might drop form for a game. And that's where you need Apolis to put up their hands. I think Apolis is still playing a very individualistic football. He's still playing a football maybe Yako Pulukwani City, where he was the be-all and end-all of everything. And maybe something he needs to learn is that at Pirates, you have the quality of player around you to actually play off of them. So what I wanted to see was that Bafana Apolis, who does drop into the middle a little bit, but trusts Abotito to play the ball, trusts the other guys to give him the ball, to allow him to build up with that ball, instead of it being a lot of 1v1s, right? I think Koto, his engine had to give up some time, and I think he was a little bit tired in this game. What I did like, what I enjoyed, was that Pirates did fix the spatial problem that they had in the previous games. I've spoken before about how when you play a game with Mahopa, with Apolis, with Mfukeng, with Sibelebele, what you're doing is you're collapsing that 10. And I think Utito goes missing in that when everything is happening. He can't find space, and Utito becomes a smaller player when there's other players around him. So it was good to have Mabasa in, because what Mabasa allowed you was a focal point for the opposing defense to focus on. So now you have to watch Apolis, you have to watch Mabasa, and that allowed Tito a little bit of freedom. So you saw Mabasa dropping back in, allowing Tito to go in and Tito to get the chances that he got, that maybe he should have finished and done better with, but he was a lot freer to move around. Right, he was a lot freer to play, especially since Usbelebele on the other side, they had made sure that every time he gets the ball, 2-3 players are around him. So having Mabasa in was great, because it allowed that opening of that defense to give Abotito space. Now, what's interesting about this game, as I always say, Pirates is a team that builds up on the wings. It's either they play it up through Abohoto or they play that long ball. Like now when I say long ball, you don't listen to me. So I'll say what they say on TV, the diagonal ball that comes from Mbogazi going out to the wings. They almost cheat to get into those spaces. But what's interesting about this game is because Orbit had done so well to pressurize the wings and push up a little bit, it allowed them something that Pirates doesn't normally do. And that was the ability to play directly up the middle, because Orbit's press was not as coordinated as Kukune's press. So Kukune pressed you to put you into a corner so that you play the ball out. Whereas the Orbit was almost, funny enough, trying to zonal press, where, I'm going to call it zonal pressing, where one striker goes towards Bogazi, the other one goes towards the other centre back, but there's no one who's there to watch that pass in the middle. And what we were seeing was Unduli was getting the ball a lot, Umariko was getting the ball a lot and not knowing what to do with it, which was very interesting, because normally you don't play Mbule there because Mbule might not have the space to turn normally. But in this game, because Orbit was playing such an open, positive game, there was spaces in the mid that could have been taken advantage of if Mbule had started, which was rectified by the coach in the second half. He brought him in and you started to see some of how they were playing. My issue with Orbit is that I think their defense is great. I think their keeper is one to look out for. He can play the ball out. He can sweep a keeper, can do all of that stuff, but they tend to get overexcited. That defense with that 43-year-old man in front of them actually played some great football in terms of being comfortable enough to play out that ball, to suck Pirates in, to neutralize some of their attack, but also be able to play out. And you saw them using the spaces. It kind of reminded me of Isbanye playing versus Sundowns, where you absorb, you get the ball, then you play it out. But the problem again with our players, especially in the final thirds, is that they don't look up. And like I said, there were so many runs where Pirates' defense was open because they didn't have somebody dedicated to stay in front of them. Unduli still lacks that timing. There was nobody there. But then also the wings. Ushandu is not the best right back. Uhoto's usually gone, and I think he was tired. He was out of it. So it was a lot of 1v1s where Mbogazi had to do an incredible job of being the one-man defense. There was points where Mbogazi was even dropping back. So if you're watching, they'd have the ball or they'd have the ball, they bring up the ball, and he'd purposefully sit all the way back, like sit deeper, almost stopping that offside trap, but sitting deeper because he understood that that ball is going to get through and I'm going to be the one that's going to have to deal with that. And I think that's a maturity, because other defenders might have pushed all the way up as well, and then now you get caught on the counter quite a bit. Orbit, like I said, played some great football at times, but great football means nothing if you don't have a finish. Great football means nothing if you don't play the through pass. Great football means nothing if now you've done the job of beating two defenders, you're looking at the post and you see the headlines. You see yourself in the headlines, you see yourself in the replays, and you fail to make a simple 2-meter pass to the guy next to you who's open, who maybe has a better opportunity to score. Now, Orbit wasn't quiet. They forced Chain 2 saves, if I remember correctly. There was one where Chain tried to clear the ball. Then the ball was played directly back in. Like, it tried to clear the ball. They got the ball back because there was a missed pass. They hit it at the same time. He had to save it. Then there was another long shot that he saved. What was a little bit frustrating from Orbit is that for most of that game, they were playing so well. For most of that game, they were outplaying Pirates in terms of uktungi bola. They have a little bit of that dance Marumo Gallants in them, which also funny because they couldn't finish. Marumo Gallants always couldn't finish their chances. But anyway, they have a little bit of that dance Marumo Gallants in them where they're playing the ball, right? But then coach was like, no, second half, I'm going to bring in the tall striker and start playing route one balls. And in my head, I'm thinking, the one thing that you were doing, especially with Mbule on the pitch, is when you had the ball on the ground, literally the first few minutes when Mbule came onto that pitch, he made a reckless foul because he was playing CDM. He was playing a defensive six almost exclusively. So now when they're playing the ball, it's almost like a Kaizer type of thing where if I force you to defend, you're going to make mistakes. So when they stopped playing that football and went long, that allowed Mbule to take a step up into the midfield, to take a step up into attacking spaces. It gave them the ability. I mean, Talente and Mbule are not the best defenders. But now because you're playing at Doom, you lose the ball, you come back. Doom, you have committed players forward, you're trying to win that first ball. Pirates are swallowing everything up and playing it up immediately. Now Mbule have space. Now your defense is bare and has to deal with the movement, which Pirates was giving them problems with the movement. And maybe to Pirates' detriment, they were being a little bit too sexy with the ball. There was a point where somebody tried, I'm not sure who the player was, they had the ball was played in, they tried to backheel it in the midfield, just sexy nyana, and they were losing the ball because of those type of plays, which maybe raises a red flag for Pirates to say, in as beautiful as the second half looked, the goal was still Siema's goal that stood. And if Siema doesn't pop up and score that goal, with how you played in the first half, and even how maybe good you looked in the second half, how fluid you looked in the second half, you couldn't finish. And it felt like the shoe was on the other foot, where Orbit had that in the first half, where they were playing very well. They were opening up the spaces. The start of the second half, they were out here moving Pirates around and scoring and closing Pirates down. Pirates had that thing in the second half where they were playing the ball and it looked exciting and they were passing and they were doing all the stuff. But when you look at the shots that were taken, when you look number of quality chances created, when you look at the balance of how the game ended and how if Orbit scores that goal, it's a 1-1, they didn't give you much. It looked great, right? But I digress. I think Pirates 3 points, needed 3 points. Sometimes you just need to collect it. Sometimes you don't need to know how. And I want to again stress that this was something that Pirates did very well last season. Pirates wasn't flowing and beautiful football and all of that for a lot of last season. A lot of last season was Abo CBC, Abo Chain, grinding. Right, grinding to make sure that the other team doesn't score or they score one, and then the other guys maybe scoring kadi half chances, not even half chances, I'd say quarter chances that just happen to pop up, and then they shoot and it goes in. Talent Mbata scoring, really some of the shots he were taking were not build-up shots. The goals that he scored, some of the goals he was scoring were not goals that were orchestrated goals. Right, sometimes it's just about it pops up, you score. How sustainable that is, I don't know. Because that's the question I ask. What happens when there's no excitement? What happens when there's no hero? What happens when the game is boring? What happens when you're being outplayed? Can you consistently go and get the 3 points? Can you consistently go out and say, okay, this is now what we do? Because the machine you're chasing, that's what they're good at. Whether they're in the game or not in the game. I mean, they came out and they played the game that they did. It didn't look sexy. But if you can just get the 3 points and continue getting the 3 points. So I don't want to say too much because it's still early. But there are some worrying signs in that can you find your starting lineup, number one? Because it feels like now we've seen a couple of changes. Sibelebele was a right back at some point during the past games. The central pairing, some days it's Mariko and Dooley. Some days Umbule starting. Some days he still needs to figure out what his starting lineup is, because sometimes you won't be able to fix your wrongs half time. And that's a tough thing to do. So let's see what Pirates does. I think, again, there's no such thing as an ugly 3 points, especially for this Pirates team. Hopefully they can continue building and learn from this. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'll see you guys on the next one. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, do all of those really nice things. Bye, everyone.